The rise of the web has taken JavaScript places it was never conceived to be. It has become one of the most important languages in today's world. Now, in our previous JavaScript tutorial, we discussed about all the basics and fundamentals of the language. And in this advanced JavaScript tutorial, we will talk about some of the advanced aspects of the programming language. Now, before we get started, let's have a look at today's agenda. So first, we will have an overview of JavaScript and what were the basics and fundamentals that we learned in the previous JavaScript tutorial. Then we will move on to the advanced topics like the advanced working with functions. Then we will talk about JavaScript namespaces, then prototypes, and then we will see how error handling works. And we will also discuss about modules in JavaScript. Moving on, we will talk about chaining JavaScript methods. And finally, we will also see what are generators. Now, these are some of the advanced topics that will be covered in this tutorial. So now let's get started and have an overview of JavaScript and the different basics and fundamentals of this language. So JavaScript is a high-level interpreted programming language which is used to make web pages more interactive. It is a very powerful client-side scripting language that makes your web page more lively and interactive. Now, it is a programming language that helps you implement a complex and beautiful design on web pages. If you want your web page to look alive and do a lot more than just gawk at you, JavaScript is a must. So talking about some of the features of JavaScript, it is a scripting language and has nothing to do with Java. Initially, it was named Mocha, then changed to LiveScript, and finally it was named JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is an object-based programming language that supports polymorphism, encapsulation, and inheritance as well. Also, you can run JavaScript not only in the browser, but also on the server and any device which has a JavaScript engine. Now, in our previous tutorial, we discussed about some of the basics and fundamentals like the variables, constants, data types, objects, arrays, functions, conditional statements, loops, and switch cases. Now, in this advanced JavaScript tutorial, we will talk about some of the advanced aspects of JavaScript. So let's first talk about the advanced working with functions. Now, a function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform single related action. Some of the advanced working with functions include recursion, closure, the new function, arrow functions, rest parameters and spread operator, the global object, the function object, then there's set timeout and set interval, and then there's function binding. Now here in this tutorial, we will discuss about all of these functions in detail. So let's begin with recursion. So recursion is a programming pattern that helps in situations where a task can be naturally split into several tasks of the same kind but simpler, or when a task can be simplified into an easy action and a simpler variant of the same task. Now, in the process of solving a task, a function can call many other functions. A partial case of this is when a function calls itself. Thus, it is known as recursion. So let's take an example and see how recursion works. So here we will just create a function for power, and inside that we will take two parameters such as x and n. Now here we will give another condition like if n equals 1. So we are giving the condition that if the value of n is equal to 1, we will return the value of x. So this is basically taking the power. So if anything has a power of 1, it will return the same value. Now we have to give the else condition as well. So for that we will just write else. Then we will write return x into power of x comma n minus 1. So here what happens is that we are just calculating the power value, and what happens if we take a power value and what it should return. So here we have given the formula as return x into power and x comma n minus 1. And then we will just take the alert message here. So for that we have power function that we have used, And now here we will be giving two values that we want to check the power for. So suppose I'm taking 2, 4. So here the x value is 2, whereas the n value is 4. So basically it is 2 to the power 4. So this is how we calculate the power here. So now 2 to the power 4 will definitely give us the output as 16 here. Now in this example, the recursive function simplifies the task and calls itself. So what happens here is that we just directly take the recursive function so that you don't have to keep writing this again and again. You're just providing the if-else condition here, and with the alert you can just give any particular value and find out the power for any of these numbers. So this was about recursion. Now the second one is closure. Now JavaScript is a function-oriented language. So you can create a function dynamically, copy to another variable, or pass as an argument to another function and call from a totally different place later. Now a closure is a function that remembers its outer variables and can access them. In some languages, it is not possible, or a function should be written in a special way to make it happen. But in JavaScript, all functions are naturally closures. So now let's take an example for closures here. So here we will take a variable as add, and here we will take another function without any parameters. Then we are taking a variable counter and initializing the value as 0. And here we have another return function which has the parameter as counter equals to counter plus 1, and then we return the counter value here. So basically this is how we are incrementing the counter value. And after this, all you need to do is just call the add function here, and the number of times you call it is the number of times it gets counted here. So here I have called the add function twice. So here the counter will be 2. So the counter value here will be 2. Or if I call another add function here, now the counter value will be 3. So here what happens is that the function remembers its outer variables and can also access them with the help of the add function. And in JavaScript, all these functions are naturally closures. Now talking about the next one, we have the new function. Now the new function syntax is another way to create a function, and it is rarely used, but sometimes there's no alternative. So first let's have a look at the syntax of the new function. So for that we have let function, and we just take the new keyword here and we are adding another function where we will pass different arguments like argument 1, argument 2, and more such arguments. So let me just take argument n, and after that we are just calling the function body here. Now this function consists of arguments 1, 2 and till argument n, and then the given function body. So basically this is the syntax for our new function. Now let's take an example and see. So let's take a variable as sum and then create a new function with the parameters as a and then b. Now here we will add the function body, which is return a plus b. So you can see that we're passing the function body in the same parameter. So we have return a plus b here. And now we will just alert the message here. So I'll take the sum function, and here we will pass the parameters. So for example, I'm taking the value to be 1, 2. So this will add these two numbers. So here my output will be 3. Now if I change the value to 2, 2, my output will also be 4. So basically you can just pass any two values to the parameters a and b, and then put any values, and it will just give you the summation of these two values. So here the function is created literally from a string that is passed at runtime. So you can see that I've passed the return a plus b here, and you need to write the function code in the script. But the new function allows turning any string into a function. That's exactly how, with the help of new function, we have passed these two parameters in the form of a string, and also the function return a plus b. So here it has converted this particular string into a function. Thus we have got the sum value here. Next up, we have the arrow functions. Now, arrow functions are anonymous and change the way this binds in functions. It makes our code more concise and simplifies function scoping and the this keyword. But arrow functions are not just a shorthand for writing small stuff. They also have some very specific and useful features. JavaScript consists of situations where you need to write a small function which is executed somewhere else, such as we have the array for each function. Now this function is executed by for each for every array item. Then we have the set timeout function. Now this function is executed by the built-in scheduler. Now in such functions, we usually don't want to leave the current context. That's where arrow functions come in handy. So let's take an example for arrow functions. So here we have hello, and then here's the function that we have created. So basically this is our arrow function. So I'll just write here arrow function. And here we have document.getElementById. Suppose we are taking any parameter like the demo.innerHTML. Now here we have our this keyword. Now once we have done this, what happens here is that the window object calls the function here. So let me just write the window object calls the function. Now how does it call the function? So for that we have window.addEventListener, and then we have load hello. So here we are just loading our hello function. Now once you're done with this, now a button object will call the function. So here the button object calls function. So now how does a button object call the function? For that we have another document.getElementById, and we are passing this button value here. So we are inserting this button, and we are also adding the function as addEventListener. And the button event will be to click, and then we get hello. So here we are not leaving the current context, and we are using the arrow function here, and then we are just taking the different events. So first the window object calls the function here, and then we have window.addEventListener, and then the button object calls the function, for which we have document.getElementById, and we have passed the button here, for which we also have added an event which is click on the button. So this was the example for arrow function. Now let's move on to the next one, which is rest parameters and spread operator. Now many JavaScript built-in functions support an arbitrary number of arguments like the math.max, which has different arguments, and this returns the greatest of the arguments. Then we also have the object.assign, which copies properties from source 1 and then till the destination. Now rest parameter is an improved way of handling function parameter, allowing us to more easily handle various input as parameters in a function. The rest parameter syntax allows us to represent an indefinite number of arguments as an array. So let's consider an example for rest parameters. So here we'll take a function as fun, and then there will be number of inputs here. So you can pass different arguments here. Then let sum equals to 0. So we are initializing the sum value as 0. Now we are passing a for loop here, for which let I of input, and the sum value is equals to sum plus I. So we can write it as sum plus equals I. Now after this we will just pass the return sum here. So this will return the sum value here. Now once you have done this, all you need to do is just get the message here. For that we have console.log, and the first function that we're taking is with the value 1, 2. So we are passing different parameter values here. So this is the first one. Then let's take another one as console.log fun. Then let the value be 1, 2, 4. So we have passed two parameters already. Let's take another one where we have console.log fun and let the value be 1, 2, 4, and 6. Now what happens here is that it will give you the sum for these numbers. So here you can see that I have given dot 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 input. So what this specifies is that there can be any number of inputs here. You have not specified the number of inputs that can be provided. So you can see that in the first one I've given 2 inputs, then I've given 3, and then I've given 4 inputs. It will just return the summation of these two numbers. So for this it will return the value as 3. For this it will return 1 plus 2 plus 4, that is it will return 7. And then for this it will return the summation as 13. So this was about the rest parameter. Now this spread operator, which allows an iterable to expand in places where 0 plus arguments are expected. It is mostly used in variable array where there is more than one values are expected. Also, it allows us the privilege to obtain a list of parameters from any array. Now let's take an example and see how the spread operator does the concat job. So let's consider an array here where we will pass the values as 1, 2, and 3. So this is our first array. Let's take another array. So let it be let array 2 equals to, then let's pass the values to be 4, 5, and 6. Now we will just do the concatenation here. So for that we'll take the array and then we will specify the array 1 and then the array 2. So here we are taking any value that is present inside these two particular arrays and we are joining them together. So what we are doing is we will just take console.log and we will pass the array here. So what happens here is that we are concatenating these two different arrays and we're taking any value that is present inside this array. So basically we're adding these two up, we're concatenating them, and then in the final array we're getting the output. So we'll get all the values here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So basically concatenation has been done here and you get the output as all of these values present in both of these arrays. So this was about the rest parameters and the spread operators. Now let's move on to the next one, which is the global object. Now the global object provides variables and functions that are available anywhere. By default, those that are built into the language or the environment. Now recently, the global this was added to the language as a standardized name for a global object that should be supported across all environments. So basically talking about the global object here, if we take an alert in this particular way, such as we take alert hello, then this is similar to when we write window dot alert and we call this hello here. So basically these two are the same things here and both the alert functions work in the same way. So this is basically standardizing the name for a global object which is supported across all the environments and all the properties of the global object can be accessed directly. Now the next function that we'll talk about is the function object. So in JavaScript, functions are objects itself and the different properties include name and length. Now the function name usually taken from the function definition, but if there is no name, JavaScript tries to guess it from the context. Then we have the length, the number of arguments in the function definition. So the rest parameters are not counted here. Now if the function is declared as a function expression and it carries the name, then it is called a named function expression. The name can be used inside to reference itself for recursive calls or such. So let's take an example for the function object. So suppose we have a function as say hi and then we have not passed any parameter value here. We will just take the alert message to be hi. Now after this we will just pass another alert taking the function here say hi dot name. So now what it'll take is, we haven't specified any name for this, but it'll just print say hi, because it'll consider the assignment name and guess the name and print the same thing. Now we're taking another function as f2, passing two parameters as a and b, then considering another function as many, where we will specify parameters like a, b, and then more. So this is basically any number of parameters here. Then we will call the alert function again, and inside this we will call f2.length. So f2 is basically where we have passed two parameters. So this should give us the length as 2. Then we'll take another alert where we have many.length. Now for this one, it will return the value to be 2, because we have two different parameters here, so it will take the value to be 2. But what about many.length? Because we have not specified anything. But you can see that there are two things that we have specified here, that is a and b, and then we have given ... more, which means that there might be more. But this will show the numbers that it actually can see, or it can figure out from the many.length. So what happens here, this will also give the value to be 2, because we have two specific parameters as a and b. There can be more number as well, there can be any number in this one, but right now it has guessed the two values to be a and b, so it will give you the output as 2. Next up is the set timeout and set interval. Now if you want to execute a function at a certain time later, it is called as scheduling a call. Now there are two methods for it. Now the first one is set timeout, which allows us to run a function once after the interval of time. Then we have the set interval, which allows us to run a function repeatedly, starting after the interval of time, then repeating continuously at that interval. Now these methods are not a part of the JavaScript specification, but most environments have an internal scheduler and provide these methods. Now for set timeout, the syntax is let timer ID, then we take the set timeout function code, then we take the delay time and pass the different arguments like 1, 2, and as many numbers of arguments as you want to. So here is an example of the set timeout. So we have a function as say hi, and we give the alert as hello. Now we are setting the timeout here. So we are setting the timeout to be 1000 here. So what happens is that you're just specifying the time, that till how long will it go on. So here we have specified the value to be till 1000. So it will keep printing hello till the 1000th time. Then we have the set interval. The syntax for set interval is similar to set timeout. So here we have the timer ID, where we have specified the interval and we have the function code. Then we have passed the same delay and the arguments here. So this is the example for a set interval. So what we have done here is, it is similar to set timeout, just that instead of the timeout, we are setting the interval time here. So here what happens is, it will repeat with the interval of 2 seconds. And then in the next section, it will stop after 5 seconds. So we've just taken the set timeout function, clear interval timer ID and alert stop. And we have specified the value to be 5000, which is 5 seconds. So it will stop after 5 seconds. Now moving on to the next one, there's function binding. Now when passing object methods as callbacks, for instance to set timeout, there is a known problem of losing this. Now the functions provide a built-in method bind that allows fixing this. Now you can have a look at the syntax. So we have a let bound function, which will take the function.bind context. Now the result of function.bind context is a special function like exotic object that is callable as function and transparently passes the call to function setting this equals to context. So here is an example for the same. So here we have taken a user and then we have passed the parameter values as first name John. Then we have called the function here and given the alert as this dot first name. So again, let function user, we have binded the user. So what happens is, whenever you call the function user function here, you will get the first name. So the output will be John because it's binding the user value inside this. So we're not gonna lose any this function here. So these were some of the examples of advanced working with functions. Now let's move on and talk about JavaScript namespaces. Now JavaScript does not support namespaces, but the namespaces are important as they help reduce the number of identifiers for variables, objects, and functions that are added to the global scope in your application. Now JavaScript is a flexible language and there are ways to work around this limitation and implement your own namespaces. So why do we need namespaces? In JavaScript, the codes share a single global namespace, which is simply a single global object that holds all global variables and functions as properties. Now in the browser, this is the window object which tends to pollute the global scope if there are too many objects. Now here is an example for the namespace. So here we have taken the first variable as num and given the value to be 5. Then we have taken another object with no parameter values. Then we have passed another string as hello Edureka. Then we have called a function sum and taken the value as x and y. That is, we are calling two parameters x and y, for which the total will be equal to x plus y, and we are returning the total value. So this will basically give the sum value. And then we have taken another variable as numr, which is equals to sum 3, 3 or any value that you want to pass here. But what happens in this example is that the identifiers num, object, string, and sum are properly declared using the variable and let keyword. But the function scoped variable total is missing a var and numr is a misspelling of num. Now here JavaScript adds both total and numr to the global namespace, which most likely is not what you want. So this was about the JavaScript namespaces. The next topic is the prototypes. Now in JavaScript, objects have a special hidden property known as prototype, which depicts either null or references another object. Now that object is called a prototype. Now here we will discuss two important features of prototype. The first one is prototypal inheritance. Then we have the prototype methods, objects without the proto. Now firstly, talking about prototypal inheritance. In programming, we often want to take something and extend it. Suppose you have a user object with its properties and methods and you want to make admin and guest as slightly modified variants of it. Here you want to reuse what is there in the user, not copy its methods, just build a new object on top of it. So prototypal inheritance is a language feature that helps in that. So here is an example for the prototypal inheritance. So the first keyword is pet, and inside this we have passed different properties like it eats, so a pet eats, which is true. And then we have taken another variable which is dog. Inside dog the properties are jumps, which is also true. Now we are using the dog.proto equals to pet in order to inherit all the properties of pet into dog. Now here we can find both properties in dog. So whenever we take the alert for dog.eats, it gives us true, and even for dog.jumps, it gives us true. But we have specified only the jump property inside dog. But here with the proto function, we have also considered all the values inside pet. So here if you are looking for a property in dog and it's missing, JavaScript automatically takes it from pet. Now the next one is the prototype methods, objects without proto. So in prototypal inheritance we used the proto, but this is an outdated method now. So here we will have a look at the modern methods to set up a prototype. So the first one is to take object.create proto, then take the descriptors. It creates an empty object with given proto as prototype and optional property descriptors. The second option is just take object.getPrototype of and then take object inside the function. So this will return the prototype of the object. Then finally we have object.setPrototype of object, proto. We're passing two parameters. The first one is the object and the second one is the proto. Now this method sets the prototype of object to proto. So here is an example for this. So here you can see we have taken the similar example as prototypal inheritance, but without using the outdated method of proto. So here we have pet, which has property as eats true. Now here we will create a new object with pet as a prototype. So we have taken dog as the new object, then we have object.create pet. So basically we are creating a new object with pet as a prototype here. So when we alert dog.eats, it also gives the output as true because it has taken the properties from pet already. Now when we take alert object.getPrototype of dog equal to pet, it still gives the value to be true because now the properties of dog is similar to pet because we have inherited the properties of pet here already. Now object.setPrototype of dog. So what we are doing is we are just changing the prototype of dog to null here. So here we have not passed any parameter. You can give any property here, but right now with the help of set prototype of, we have just changed the prototype of dog here. So this was the example for prototypal inheritance and prototype methods without proto. And this was all about prototypes. Now the next topic is error handling. Now, no matter how good you are at programming, your scripts might consist of errors. They may occur because of our mistakes, unexpected user input, an erroneous server response, or any other reason. So usually a script stops immediately in case of an error, printing it to console. Now there's a syntax construct as the try catch that allows catching errors and instead of dying, do something more reasonable. So for that we have the try catch syntax and it has two main blocks, that is the try and the catch. So the syntax for try catch is first you have the try block and then you have the catch where you're actually handling the error. So first the code in try block is executed. If there are no errors, then the catch error is ignored. The execution reaches the end of try and goes on skipping catch. Now in case an error occurs, then try execution is stopped and the control flows to the beginning of the catch error. Now here is an example of try and catch. So first we have the try block here for which we have the alert as begin try runs. Now here we do not have any error. So we will just give the alert as end try runs because this is running perfectly and there's no error. So we will skip the catch error part. So here we have given the alert as catch is ignored as there are no errors. But in case there was any error here, then we would have gone to the catch errors. Suppose there are errors here. Now what happens is that instead of skipping the catch error, it goes to the catch block and then checks for the error here. So try catch is an important part of error handling in JavaScript, and this is how the errors are also handled here easily. Next up we have modules in JavaScript. Now a module is a self-contained piece of code that groups semantically related variables and functions. Modules are not built-in constructs in JavaScript. But the JavaScript module pattern provides a way to create modules that have well-defined interfaces that are exposed to clients of the module. Now, an important advantage of modules is that you can modify the internal functionality whenever necessary without affecting the rest of your program. Now, this promotes encapsulation and information hiding. To define a module in JavaScript, you take advantage of anonymous closures by creating an anonymous immediate function. So here is an example for modules in JavaScript. So here we have taken the variable as module and passed a function without any parameters. And then we have taken another private variable and passed the value to be 7. Now we are calling the private method here. So what happens is when we take the module and module property and pass another value 1, then we take module method and call the function here. So here what happens is that we have called the function which is returning the module value. So basically it will return this particular variable here. And with the module property, you can modify the internal functionality whenever necessary. So what happens is here you can see first we have given the private variable as 7. Then we have taken the module.module property and modified it to 1. So here you can just take advantage of the anonymous closures by creating an anonymous immediate function, which is what we have created after the module.module method. We have just created another anonymous function. Now the next thing that we're going to talk about is chaining JavaScript methods. Now JavaScript allows you to invoke multiple methods on an object in a single expression. Now to invoke multiple methods, we have chaining. This is a process of stringing the method calls together with dots between them. The syntax for chaining is very simple. We just take the object.method1, then add dot and method2 dot method3. This is how you chain the different methods together. Now when building a chain, the object is named only once and then multiple methods are called on it. For this to work, your methods must return the object that they operate on. And each method works on the object, and when it is done, it returns it to the next call. So here is a simple example of chaining. So I've just taken a random account number with this particular value and then taken the set balance and apply credit. So basically I have chained all the details together for this particular account number, for which the balance is 15,000 and then the credit is 200. So here you learn to set a banking account which consists of the account number, the balance, and a line of credit. Now chaining in JavaScript can improve performance as well as readability. Here the jQuery library uses chaining extensively. So let's take another example and see how to chain jQuery selector methods. So here this is another way of how you can chain the jQuery selector methods, for which we have the $myDiv.removeClassOff.addClassOn, and then we have taken .css background equals to red. So we are specifying a background color, add class on, and then we are taking the class as on, removing the class off. So this is another different way of doing it with the jQuery selector. So this was about chaining. Finally, let's talk about generators here. Now generators are a special class of functions that simplify the task of writing iterators. So this function produces a sequence of results instead of a single value and generates a series of values. Thus, in JavaScript, a generator is a function that returns an object on which you can call next function. Therefore, every invocation of next function will return an object of shape. So here you have just taken a value as any and then done true or false. So the value property will contain the value. The done property is either true or false. When the done becomes true, the generator stops and won't generate any more values. So these were some of the advanced techniques and methods involved in JavaScript. So I hope you have understood all of these advanced aspects that you needed to learn for advanced JavaScript tutorial. If you have any doubts in the basic JavaScript, you can go back and watch the video on JavaScript tutorial and start from scratch, and then get back to this particular tutorial and understand the advanced aspects as well. So with this, we have come to the end of today's session. Don't forget to let us know about your opinion in the comment section below. Till then, thank you and happy learning.